Sir, economy board's last. You're holding up people who actually matter.
Listening sadly.
The voice cut through the boarding gate, cold, deliberate, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Arthur Hale stopped short. He didn't answer. Can't you read the numbers on your ticket? Or do you need me to explain how boarding works? Captain Ryan Cole stepped directly into his path. No smile. No patience. Arthur only tightened his grip on the strap of his old time-worn backpack. He lowered his head slightly, as if he had grown accustomed to being spoken to this way. We don't have all day, sir. Behind you are people with connections to make people with work, with value. A laugh broke out somewhere in the crowd. A few people turned away. A few others stared. Arthur said nothing. He moved forward slowly, slipping past the captain's shoulder without looking back. Look at the way he walks. This flight's going to be delayed because someone's too old to understand what's going on. Arthur's silence didn't make it stop. It made the cruelty bolder. And no one at the boarding gate that day knew that the very man who had just been humiliated was the only person on that flight who could save them all. If you believe that true courage doesn't live in gunfire but in the silence of those who have walked through war, subscribe to Service Honor Stories so we can preserve the memory, dignity, and reverence owed to our heroes. Arthur Hale moved down the aisle of the aircraft cabin. Slowly, but without hesitation. He didn't look back. Didn't search for a single face in the crowd behind him. Didn't explain. Didn't defend himself. The old backpack on his shoulder brushed lightly against seatbacks as he passed. The fabric was frayed. The color long faded. An object that no longer belonged in the polished interior of a modern aircraft. Arthur murmured a soft apology when he accidentally touched another passenger's hand, then kept walking. No one responded. Up front, Captain Ryan Cole's voice came over the cabin speaker deliberately, slow-edged with coldness. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be departing a few minutes late due to certain passengers failing to follow proper boarding procedures. A few sighs rippled through the cabin. A quiet chuckle. A glance shot toward the back. Arthur didn't react. He found the last row. The middle seat. He sat down carefully, as if every movement had been practiced for years. Arthur slipped the backpack off his shoulder and placed it neatly beneath the seat in front of him. Not tossed, not shoved, just placed exactly where it belonged. He leaned back. Both hands rested on his thighs. Rough, calloused fingers slowly closed together. Arthur closed his eyes. His breathing was steady, deep, controlled. This wasn't the exhaustion of an old man. It was the breathing of someone who had learned how to stay calm when everything around him collapsed. Captain Cole spoke again, shorter this time, sharper. Hope everyone understands. Not everyone is clear-headed enough to grasp simple numbers. There was no objection. No one stood up. A young passenger beside Arthur wore headphones, eyes fixed on his phone. A woman in the row ahead adjusted her seatbelt. Life went on as if nothing unusual had happened. Arthur kept his eyes closed. The lines on his forehead didn't move. He had heard voices like these before. Not in an airplane cabin, but in places far worse. Arthur didn't need to prove anything. Didn't need anyone to believe him. He only needed to remain silent. In the cockpit, Captain Cole leaned back and smirked. Done. Finally, sitting still. First Officer Emily Park didn't answer. She looked at the control panel, then cast a brief glance toward the rear of the cabin. She said nothing. Arthur opened his eyes for a brief moment, gazing up at the ceiling. Then he closed them again. Not to sleep, but to be still with himself. The cabin door closed. The aircraft began to taxi. Arthur didn't change position. Didn't tighten his seatbelt early. Didn't look out the window. He sat there like a point of stillness inside a space full of motion. And when the wheels finally left the ground, that silence was no longer a choice. It became the only thing left to face what lay ahead. The flight had taken off, and in just a few minutes, Arthur Hale's silence would be pulled into a test with no room for error, a place where every second would decide lives. Denver Center, this is Flight 4047. Confirm altitude. There was no reply. Captain Ryan Cole tilted his head, frowning. Denver Center, do you read? Only a long stretching void. Emily Park glanced quickly at the control panel. The communications display was frozen. She tried again. Radio 1, no signal. Cole struck the yoke with the flat of his hand. Switch to the backup channel. Emily did. Nothing. Backup is dead too. The cockpit began to heat up in a way familiar to anyone who has ever been in real trouble. Not from temperature, from pressure. Cole inhaled sharply. Transponder, Emily checked. No response. Cole spun around. That's impossible. He tried again. Then again. No sound. No identification code. We just disappeared, Emily said, her voice low but clear. Cole scoffed, forcing calm. No one just disappears in the sky. Emily didn't look at him. No radio. No transponder. On ground radar, we're a question mark. The silence in the cockpit thickened. Cole slid his seat back and stared straight ahead. Try rebooting the system. Emily shook her head. I've checked the breakers. Everything's in the correct position. Cole tapped the panel hard. Then what the hell is happening? Emily looked at the weather map. A dark mass spread directly ahead of the aircraft. We're heading into dangerous weather. Cole glanced at it. It's just a cloud system. Emily didn't argue. No communication. No guidance. And no one knows where we are. Cole clenched his jaw. I'll notify the cabin. He switched on the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're addressing a minor technical issue. Please remain seated. The word minor fell from his mouth, sounding nothing like the truth. Emily turned to him. You know this isn't minor? Cole didn't answer. He stared into the empty space ahead where a familiar flight path had turned into a blind corridor. Ryan, Emily said, using his name this time without rank. If we can't re-establish contact, they'll treat this as a threat. Cole turned back. Don't say that. Emily kept her voice steady. That's the protocol. A civilian aircraft losing signal in restricted airspace. Cole fell silent. Emily continued, each word landing with weight. They won't wait. In the passenger cabin, Arthur Hale opened his eyes. Not because of turbulence, not because of noise, but because of something deeply familiar. The silence had lasted longer than normal. Arthur lifted his head slightly. He didn't look around. He listened not for sound, but for the gaps between sounds. The engines were steady, but the familiar voice of air traffic control was missing from the system. Arthur placed his hand on his thigh. His fingers tightened slightly. In the cockpit, Cole turned to Emily. Try the emergency frequency. Emily did. No signal. Cole's breathing quickened. We're flying blind, Emily nodded, and straight into a dead zone. Cole ground his teeth. I'm turning back. Emily looked at the map. Turning now without guidance will make it worse. Cole let out a hollow laugh. Then what do you suggest? Emily paused for a second. We need communication. Any way we can get it. In the back, Arthur gently closed his eyes, not to avoid what was happening, but to focus. He had been in moments like this before, when silence was no longer peace but the warning sign of danger closing in. The aircraft continued forward. No one in the passenger cabin understood what was happening. But somewhere below on the ground, radar screens began to show an abnormal, empty space, and that silence was no longer considered harmless. On the ground, when an aircraft stops speaking, silence is not understood as calm, but as a threat that must be answered. On the ground, a radar screen revealed an abnormal void. A civilian flight was no longer responding. No identification code. No signal. Confirm the target. No response from the aircraft. Voices in the operations room became clipped and precise. No emotion. No speculation. Time since loss of contact. Over 3 minutes. A brief silence followed. Then the order was given. Activate intercept protocol. 2 F-16 fighter jets were ordered into the air. Not because of suspicion toward any individual, but because of a rule that never changes anything silent in the sky can become a threat. In the passenger cabin, no one knew. One person pulled a blanket higher. Another adjusted their seat. The brief clink of a spoon against a plastic cup sounded and faded. Arthur Hale opened his eyes. Not because of noise, but because of a feeling he knew too well. A silence that had stretched longer than normal. A missing beat in the familiar rhythm of flight. He didn't turn around. Didn't look around. Arthur simply sat a little straighter. His right hand touched the pocket of his jacket. Fingers brushed against the stiff edge of fabric. An old object rested there. Arthur inhaled. Slow. Deep. In the cockpit, Captain Ryan Cole stared into the empty space ahead. I can't believe this. Emily Park kept her voice steady. Ground procedures won't wait. Cole let out a hollow laugh. We're a civilian aircraft. Emily didn't look at him. Radar doesn't distinguish that when we're silent. Cole slammed his hand onto the panel. Damn it! Emily turned toward him. Ryan, they'll treat this as a situation requiring intervention. Cole shook his head. I don't want to think about that. Emily spoke slowly, each word clear, but they will. Arthur tilted his head slightly. He heard the cabin speaker crackle, broken, incomplete. Not an announcement. Just a gap between two breaths of the aircraft. He planted both feet firmly on the floor. No rush, no haste. Arthur had sat in tighter spaces than this, in situations with no way out. His hand tightened gently inside the jacket pocket. Not to check, but to confirm. The old object was still there, as it always was before he ever needed it. A flight attendant passed by, glancing at Arthur. Sir, please fasten your seatbelt. Arthur nodded lightly. Yes. His voice was low, calm. No one paid further attention. No one asked why his eyes had changed. In the cockpit, Cole turned to Emily. If they've already scrambled, Emily, cut him off. We don't have much time. Arthur placed his hand on the seatbelt, then released it. He stood up, not hurried, not drawing attention. Just an older man rising in the middle of the cabin. The man who had been seen as a burden. The man blamed for the delay. Arthur turned toward the front. His first step was slow, but steady. He didn't ask permission. Didn't wait. He walked as if the decision had been made long ago. The man deemed useless began moving toward the cockpit, and this time not to find a seat, but to end the silence that was pushing everyone to the edge. Arthur Hale stopped in front of the cockpit door. He stood straight. Didn't knock in a hurry. Didn't press. A flight attendant stepped out. Her voice tense, but still professional. Sir, please return to your seat. This is a restricted area. Arthur looked directly at her. I need to speak with the captain. She shook her head. That's not permitted. Arthur didn't argue. He repeated himself more slowly. I need to speak with the captain. Now. The flight attendant glanced quickly toward the cockpit, then back at him. Sir, please cooperate. From inside, Captain Ryan Cole's voice cut through the intercom, sharp, irritated. Take him back to his seat. We're busy. Arthur tilted his head slightly. He took half a step forward. I'm not going back. Cole let out a dry laugh. And who do you think you are giving orders here? Arthur looked up at the frosted cockpit window. The only person on this aircraft who can still hear what you can't. Cole slammed his hand down. That's enough. This is not the place for nonsense. Arthur didn't reply. He leaned toward the intercom mounted on the wall. His hand rested on it, steady, familiar. He spoke one sentence, not loudly, not trembling. You have no comms. Fighters are inbound. Open the door. The cockpit fell silent. No rebuttal, no laughter, no sarcasm. Emily Park turned to Captain Cole. Her eyes widened. Did you hear that Cole swallowed hard? That's not possible. Arthur remained where he was. He didn't explain further. He didn't push. Emily stepped closer to the door. Who are you? Arthur answered immediately. Someone who understands what silence in the sky means. One breath passed, then another. Cole stared into the empty space ahead. He could no longer find words to argue. Only facts lined up before him, cold, unforgiving. Emily. His voice dropped. Emily didn't wait. She reached out. The door opened. Arthur stepped inside. The familiar scent of metal. The dry hum of systems running under abnormal strain. He didn't look at Cole. He looked at the control panel. Emily moved aside. She whispered, What do you need? Arthur set his backpack down, unzipped it, took out a small object, old, scarred by years of use. Cole froze when he saw it. That is... Arthur nodded. Yes. Emily drew a deep breath. Can you... Arthur didn't wait for her to finish. He put on the headset. His fingers adjusted the frequency knob, precise, decisive. Cole stood motionless. For the first time since the flight began, he said nothing. Arthur spoke. His voice was different now. Low, clear, a cadence that did not belong to the present. Emily stared at him, her heart racing. How long have you been doing this? Arthur didn't take his eyes off the panel, long enough to know when silence is required and when it isn't. Cole turned away. His hands trembled slightly. I'm sorry, he said, without looking up. Arthur didn't respond. He didn't need an apology. He needed a connection. Outside, the sky was still silent. But inside the cockpit, an old memory was waking up. And when the cockpit door finally opened, what stepped inside was not a passenger, but the memory of lives once saved by calm knowledge and restraint. Arthur Hale adjusted his headset. He didn't rush. He didn't look at the two pilots. His hand turned the frequency dial and stopped at a point he had known for a very long time. The military guard frequency. Arthur pressed the transmit button. His voice came through low and clean, without a single wasted beat. Guard. This is Ghost. Emily Parks snapped around. Do you hear that Captain Ryan Cole didn't respond? He stood frozen eyes locked on the control panel. Arthur continued each word, clear, steady, never raised. Ghost Morrison. Correction. He paused for half a beat. Colonel Arthur Hale. Call sign Ghost. The cockpit went completely still. Arthur didn't look at their reactions. He went on his cadence, precise, like a report repeated hundreds of times over a lifetime. Civilian aircraft has lost all communications and transponder. Currently at flight level 390. Approximate coordinates 38 north, 101 west. Request confirmation of intercept. There was no immediate response. Emily held her breath. Cole swallowed hard. Arthur kept the transmit button pressed. He didn't rush. He didn't repeat himself. Then another voice came through the headset. Bolder. Deeper. Ghost. Confirm call sign. Arthur replied instantly. Alpha Tango 79er. A brief silence followed. Then the voice changed completely. Respectful. Clear. Ghost NORAD confirms. We have you on radar. Emily raised a hand to her mouth. Oh my God, Arthur continued. Request cancellation of intercept and transition to escort. Civilian aircraft. Copy that, Ghost. The voice replied without hesitation. The F-16s are ours. They are disengaging and transitioning to escort. Stand by for guidance. Arthur nodded slightly, though no one could see him. Request vector around weather ahead. Safety priority. Roger. Heading 270. Descend to flight level 280. We'll take you home. Arthur released the transmit button. The cockpit remained silent. But it was no longer dangerous silence. Emily looked at Arthur, her eyes wet. Sir, you are... Arthur removed the headset and set it down neatly. Just someone who knows which frequencies must never be forgotten. Cole leaned against his seat. His hands were visibly shaking. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. Arthur didn't look at him. He looked forward. Do your job. Emily drew a deep breath. We're being escorted now. Cole nodded, his voice hoarse. Understood. Arthur put the headset back on. Not to speak again. Only to listen. NORAD's voice came through once more. Ghost F-16s are in position. You'll see them shortly. Arthur didn't reply. He didn't need confirmation of what he already knew. Emily whispered. How many times have you done this? Arthur answered simply. Enough to know when people need a calm voice. Cole looked up. For the first time, he saw Arthur as a superior officer. Not because of rank, but because of how he stood in the middle of chaos. Thank you, Cole said this time without arrogance. Arthur gave a small nod. Don't thank me. Remember today. Emily wiped her tears. We won't forget. Arthur stood, his movements slow, steady. He placed the radio back into the backpack, zipped it closed. The job was done. Outside, the aircraft changed course, no longer flying toward danger. Arthur stepped out of the cockpit. No one stopped him. No one spoke. The truth had been spoken, not with shouting, not with commands, but with the right voice at the right moment. Power had shifted not because someone spoke louder, but because someone knew exactly what needed to be said when the entire sky had fallen silent. The wheels touched down. There was no immediate cheer, only a long breath that had been held too long released all at once. Arthur Hale remained seated. Both hands rested on his thighs. His eyes closed for a brief second, as if to be certain it was truly over. Then one person stood, then another. The entire cabin rose together, without needing to be told. "Ladies and gentlemen," a male voice said, trembling but clear. "There's a man on this flight who saved every one of us." Arthur opened his eyes. He did not turn around. "Colonel Arthur Hale, United States Air Force." The man continued. "Please allow us to honor him." Applause swelled, not loud or frantic, but heavy and sustained. No whistles, no chants. Arthur stood. He turned and gave a very slight nod. That was all. A figure in uniform stepped into the aisle. General's insignia on his shoulders. A stern face, eyes wet. The general stopped in front of Arthur. He came to attention, rendered a proper salute. "Sir," the general said, his voice low and measured. "The Air Force never forgot you." Arthur returned the salute. The motion stiff but precise. The general stepped forward and pulled Arthur into a tight embrace. "Welcome home, Ghost." Arthur said nothing. He placed a hand on the general's shoulder, squeezed once, then released. Captain Ryan Cole stood behind them, his face drained of color. A man in a suit stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Captain Cole, you are hereby suspended from duty, effective immediately pending investigation." Cole nodded. "Yes, sir." He turned toward Arthur. "Sir, I was wrong." Arthur looked at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head gently. "You weren't wrong because you lacked skill," Arthur said. "You were wrong because you forgot how to see a human being." Cole bowed his head. "I'm sorry." Arthur did not respond. He did not need an apology to feel whole. A representative of the airline stepped forward. "Colonel Hale, we would like to offer you lifetime first-class travel." Arthur shook his head. "I fly to go home," he said, "not to collect rewards." The man hesitated. "But at least allow us." Arthur nodded once. "Thank you." One word. Nothing more. The passengers formed a narrow aisle. No one touched him. No one raised a phone. Arthur walked through slowly, every step steady. The general turned back to Captain Cole. "You were trained to fly aircraft," he said, "but today you need to relearn respect." Cole nodded. "I understand." Arthur stopped at the cabin door. He turned back one last time. He said nothing, just a very small nod to those who had stood, not to thank them, but to remind them. Honor does not need to be repaid. It only needs to be remembered. So those who come after do not repeat the same mistake. Arthur Hale left the aircraft the same way he had boarded it, quietly. No one held him back. No one called his name. He walked down the aisle that had once been filled with judging eyes, now replaced by respectful silence. The passengers stood still, leaving enough space for him to pass. No phones were raised. No one spoke a loud word of thanks. Respect in that moment did not need sound. Arthur paused briefly at the last row. The middle seat, the place where he had sat for the entire flight. He bent down, placed the old radio on the seat cushion. Its paint was scratched, the antenna slightly bent, an object no longer suited to the age of digital screens and automated systems. Yet it rested there calmly, as if it had belonged in many places before. Arthur took a small piece of paper from his pocket, the back of his boarding pass. He wrote a few short words, firm handwriting unadorned. "For the next pilot who forgets old frequencies, save lives." He placed the note beneath the radio. Didn't fold it. Didn't hide it. Arthur straightened, turned away. Left the cabin without looking back. After he was gone, no one sat down right away. The silence lingered. Not heavy, just deep. A young pilot stepped out of the cockpit. He was very new, his uniform crisp, his eyes full of questions. He stopped at the last row, looked at the radio, looked at the note. He bent down and lifted the radio. Its weight surprised him. Not heavy in mass, but heavy with meaning. He read the note, said nothing, just stood there still. In that moment, he understood something without anyone needing to explain. There are things not taught in manuals. There are frequencies not found on control panels. Honor is not a brand new insignia on a shoulder. Honor is memory preserved at the right moment. Outside, Arthur Hale walked into open space. No escort. No ceremony. He pulled the worn strap of his old backpack higher on his shoulder. His steps slow, steady. Arthur no longer carried the radio with him. He had left it where it was needed most. He understood that legacy is not a story told again and again. Legacy is a small object placed in the right place at the right time, a reminder that needs no signature, a lesson that requires no teacher standing at a podium. Inside the aircraft, the young pilot set the radio down on a table. He stood straighter. No one asked him to. He took a deep breath, as if accepting a new responsibility, one not written into any contract. Honor does not lie in age or position, but in what you carry when every other system fails. Service honor stories, we remember the quiet heroes. If this story makes you believe that honor and kindness never retire, please share this video and subscribe to Service Honor Stories, so none of their memories are ever forgotten.